Absolutely, and I think that you and I have probably highlighted the exact problem with what this request looks like in reality, because there is absolutely no way in a million years that you could police this.
Well,
It would be impossible to police.
But on that point, there's a second reason I gave that example, Barry. If I can, let me just show you this. This is from the Times. It's called "Social Distancing Guidelines Are Outdated and Simplistic," say scientists. It's dated on the 26th of August, 2020. It's a recent article by their health correspondent, Kat Lai, and it says, "Shouting outdoors without a mask may be less risky for COVID-19 transmission than being silent in a poorly ventilated area without one." Now, this is what I meant, right? The point is that this idea that there is a solution to this medically is incorrect, and therefore I was trying to still man the good doctor by saying, to give him the benefit of the doubt, I don't think he's making a medical case, because actually there isn't a medical case that's that strong, but rather I think he's making a consistency, simplicity of the rules point, and therefore, I proceeded with the rest of it. So, but actually on the medical evidence, I will not only stand by it, but actually give you further evidence as I've just had to say none of it is really that conclusive in any direction.
And I think that's pretty clear, but I think that if the rule of simplification were the case, then what you would do is delete the bit that says unless there's a risk of being within 2 metres, because someone's perceived risk within being within 2 metres might consist of, well, I'm walking down a high street that is empty of people, right? So there is a risk I could meet somebody coming in the opposite direction, but I've got eyes that help me to judge when that's likely to happen, and therefore I'm quite happy to walk without a mask.
And now, Barry, I'm really sorry, but it's 3 o'clock.
Really tricky.
Yeah, we've got to go to the news. I'm really, really sorry about that. And everyone else has been trying to get through as well. It's remained a full switchboard for the full 2 hours, but we do want to do another topic, so we are going to move on. Stay with us. We're going to talk about quotas, racial quotas. The US Department of Justice has sued Yale University, alleging it discriminates against white and Asian American students in favour of black and Hispanic candidates. Do quota systems work? You're listening to Margin Hours here on LBC. The time is 3 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation, this is LBC. From Global's newsroom at 3 o'clock, leaders across Northern England are urging the government to provide more cash to support areas which face going into further coronavirus lockdowns. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham says that accepting Chancellor Rishi Sunak's financial package would be to surrender people to hardship in the run-up to Christmas. The Prime Minister is expected to outline a new 3-tiered system of restrictions on Monday, with measures expected to see pubs and restaurants close in the worst affected areas, which are mainly in the north of England. The Mayor of Liverpool, Joe Anderson, says he accepts action is needed.
Round on Tuesday, it's commenced the process assigned for COVID on the number 4 on ICU. We also see being pleased that we recognise that things have to be done, nobody's against contacts, and it's about working with us unitedly.
It was last orders in pubs and restaurants across large parts of Scotland last night. Hospitality businesses in the central belt, which includes Glasgow and Edinburgh, closed their doors at 6 p.m. and will now stay shut for at least the next 16 days because of a rise in coronavirus cases. Roary O'Neill manages a bar in Edinburgh and doesn't see how the restriction will help.
I think it is massively unfair. I think we're being used as a scapegoat. We are being blamed kind of severely for when you've seen like lots of businesses and other things. Gyms are going to be remaining open, cinemas are going to be remaining open, the schools and universities are still going ahead.
New restrictions will come into force in Bangor in northwest Wales at 6 this evening. People won't be allowed to enter or leave the area without good reason and can only meet people they don't live with outdoors. Senior doctors want face masks to be made compulsory in offices and outdoors where there can't be social distancing. They also say the rule of 6 should just apply to 2 households, as is the case in Scotland. North Korea has displayed what's believed to be a previously unseen new intercontinental ballistic missile at a military parade in Pyongyang. Footage shown on state TV shows a transporter with at least 22 wheels, larger than anything displayed before by the nuclear-armed country. The Labour leader says the party needs to regain trust in Scotland. Sir Keir Starmer's told the Cooperative Party's conference that they can't win the next election without a revival of their Scottish fortunes. Labour held just 1 seat there in the December 2019 general election. In the 2010 vote, they had 41
divide people and pit racial groups against each other. Now, that's what seems to be happening. The US State Department, let me correct that, the US Department of Justice has sued Yale University, one of the Ivy League colleges in America, alleging that it discriminates against white and Asian Americans in favor of applications from black and Hispanic candidates because of the quota system. Now, let me tell you where I stand on quota systems, then I'll tell you some of the problems I have as to why I have some problems with it, but then what I actually believe would be a better thing to do to follow it. On the quota systems, the first thing I say is, look, at the end of the day, I'm not disputing that there is a racial imbalance at the upper echelons, not just as in education, but across the board in society. In particular here in Britain, if you look at, say, a British-born black CEO of any FTSE 100 company, there isn't one. There simply isn't one currently in the country, as a prime example. So there are imbalances, whether it's the gender pay gap, whether it's the racial pay gap. I mean, no one's talking really about the racial pay gap. I imagine it's bigger than the gender pay gap. But surprise, surprise, not going to get spoken about as much. Now, that's not me asking for a higher pay, by the way. No, I only want to stay here on weekends. I'm happy with this weekend show. It's too much for me every day. Now, what I'm saying is that I think quota systems, here's the concern I have with them. I genuinely believe that if you start introducing in Britain a US-style quota system, there is this real danger that it turns groups against each other, that it pits marginalised groups, disadvantaged groups against groups that are also from ethnic minorities but may not be as disadvantaged or as marginalised. So let me give you an example. In Britain, what we already know is academically, Indian Brits, British Indians, are performing better than Pakistani Brits, people like me. We also know that they're performing better than Bangladeshi Brits. We also know that women are performing at university better than men, and we know that one of the most marginalised groups in this country, now this is where, wait for it, okay, just in case you were surprised by this, more than half UK universities have a student population in which the proportion of white people, low-income families, in other words, working class white people, is less than 5%. Working class white people are one of the most marginalised groups in this society, but the reason they're not looked at and there isn't as much concern for them is because they're lumped in with white people as a bigger category. Now, of course, when you do that, you're lumping working class white people in with Boris Johnson who went to Eton. That's not really fair, because actually for me, what's more important is socioeconomic status and class than skin colour. Though, of course, racism exists, and racism is bad, and racism must be challenged, and I am a survivor of multiple racial assaults. And before anyone calls in to say Badge is excusing racism and basically is apologising for white supremacy, which, by the way, will surprise me, because that's the current atmosphere we live in, where every nuanced attempt to criticise a thought is taken as an example of secretly wishing for the extreme opposite. So no, to clarify here, I'm not denying racism exists. Obviously, look at me, right? I'm saying that one of the most marginalised groups in our society are the white working class, especially at universities. And when we go to America and we learn that the Department of Justice is suing Yale University, the reason they're doing so, and by the way, it's not just Yale. Prior to this, a group of Asian American students, and I must clarify, when you say Asian American in America, you're talking of people from China, Japan, South Korea, those sorts of countries, East Asia, the Far East. When you say Asian in Britain, you're talking of South Asians, and that's very confusing for Americans, because you're talking of people that look like me, and we look more Middle Eastern and South Asian, and actually they think you're talking of someone from, say, Japan or South Korea. So to clarify, from now on, I'm going to say South Asians when I'm referring to Pakistanis, Indians and Brits, and I'm going to say East Asians or Far East when I'm speaking of people that are from, say, Japan, South Korea, just to make sure we're not confusing the two, because Asian is too large and broad a category. So what's happening in America scores 1,310. So that's 310 points more than the black student. Right? So if you're a white student, to get equal chance to that black student, you have to score 1,310 on your SATs versus just 1,000 on your SATs. But this is where it gets really interesting. If you're East Asian in America, you have to score 1,450 to have an equal chance of admission to university than a black student who has to score 1,000. Now we can argue as to whether there's historic reasons for this. There is a case for that. Of course there is. But do we really want the kind of world where we're saying to one ethnic minority, you have to get almost 1.5 times the grades as another to get the same place at university? And it's not even an opinion. The data's there, and that's just what we're telling you you have to do. Like it or lump it. Unfair as it is, because of this person's great-great-grandfather committed a crime against this person's great-great-grandfather, you have to get 1.5 times higher the grade for the same place in an equal way than your fellow American who happens to be. By the way, there may even be richer, because this particular quota system is racial, not economic. They could have afforded all the private tuition, but at the end of the day, because they fit into a certain ethnic category, you have to score 1.5 times the grades on your SAT scores to get the very same place in that university. This is why a group of East Asian Americans and Far Eastern Asian Americans are suing not only Yale but Harvard University as well. There is a case currently running with Harvard, and there's a case running with Yale. So, despite the historic reasons, and I understand that can go into this, the problem I have with this is the following. Not only does it pit ethnic minorities against each other, it's also blind to socioeconomic status, which is, I think, even more of a real concern for me than racial categories. I mean, in science, race doesn't exist. Groups of people exist. Racism exists because it's a social group, and therefore we must recognize race because racism is real. However, the problem I have with this is that white working class boys, and we know this in Britain especially, are underrepresented in universities. So if you put in a quota system for white working class boys as well, then watch people accuse you of being racist. And there is the problem. Now, there's no way you can convince me that these white working class men in particular, but also women who are underrepresented in universities are being hard done by, because the data is there in your face. It's one of the most neglected areas of today's conversation. And the problem with it is, if we go down that path, if you can understand how radicalization occurs in Muslim communities due to grievances, then you cannot pretend you don't understand how radicalization will equally occur in white working class communities, because their jobs have been outsourced to globalization, their communities and neighborhoods are falling apart, quite literally. Go to South Sea, where I was born, and look at these coastal towns around the country. Just look at the decrepit and derelict state that most of them are falling into. And then you wonder why groups like the EDL, and you wonder why groups like Britain First Emerge are starting attracting the rise of this kind of right-wing populism. We've got to start paying attention to this problem, as important as any other form of neglect in a community, regardless of ethnic groups. So that's my first point, is it will cause more problems than it solves. In other words, the cure is worse than the disease. That's the first problem I have with the quota system. The second problem I have with it is there is also a danger of racial tokenism. And this brings me to an unrelated topic, but still serves to, as an example, serves to drive home the point. So the Oscars decide, right, we're going to have a quota for which film qualifies before they can even be considered for an Oscar. Do watch Ricky Gervais's roast, by the way, at the last and final Emmys he did, because it really does speak not only to my heart, but to the heart of the issue. And that is that you can put all this window dressing in place. Meanwhile, your biggest and most powerful studio is making a film in a genocided region of Xinjiang in China, East Turkestan, while thanking the Turpan security services for allowing you to film in that region. Well, I'm not talking about the film. Allowing you to film on land that has been cleared by a genocide. And you go and credit them, thank them in your movie. And meanwhile, you think it's going to placate people when you have a quota for your films in the Oscars. And this is what I mean by racial tokenism. That this is about effectively putting it all over the place to say, look, we've got this window dressing in place now, so don't complain. But actually, the real substantive issues are being certain structural barriers that prevent people from a different socioeconomic class background to from ascending in society. There are barriers that prevent that social mobility. If we can work to remove those barriers, one of them is training, for example. And I'll tell you this from personal experience, if you're born and raised in a family for whom English is a second language, I guarantee you that you will be at a disadvantage if your